Hi everyone, welcome to the Stitch Sessions. This week we are working on this sweet, beautiful, lovely baby blanket. And it's called the Bluebells baby blanket. And I called it that because as you can see, our shell stitch create this little bell-like shape. And for those of you that saw our wedding bells shawl, I used a similar idea, but not the exact same stitch for it. So it just creates this really pretty texture, and I added a little bit of this white accent on the edge for the border, and I'm so delighted with how it came out. I think this is super sweet for a baby blanket. I used the flex yarn. So as you can see, there's little light flecks of color. I've used this type of yarn for other projects like the round yoke baby cardigan, as well as the baby booties. So I've used them in different colors. I have to say this blue color is by far my favorite to work with. I just love how it comes out with the white contrast. It just came out beautiful. So this blanket measures a length of 29 inches across and a width of 26 inches. So in centimeters, you're looking at 73.5 centimeters lengthwise, and then you've got about 66 centimeters in width. So it falls within the average dimensions of a baby blanket. Like on average, you're looking at like a 30 by 24, like 30 inches by 24. So I generally like this size. It's perfect for being in the car seat or being in the stroller. So you can really cover up your little one nice and easily. It's not necessarily meant to wrap fully around them, although you can probably get a full wrap on a newborn. You can always make yours a larger if you wish. Just add more stitches for your foundation row and add more rows, and you've got a larger blanket. So I'm just going to pull this a little bit so you can maybe see some of the texture that comes out, and I really, really love it. So you might recognize the technique we used. It's the primrose stitch, but it's not the primrose stitch. So the primrose stitch is a combination of the sprig stitch stacked with the shell stitch. And we did have a tutorial on how to crochet the primrose stitch a while back, and I'll leave a link for that in the description box down below if you're curious. So I didn't use the exact primrose. I played around with it. I added an extra row in that repeat. Again, super simple. If you know your single crochets and chain stitches and double crochets, you are good to go. So that's pretty much it. It didn't take me too long. Like if you go right at it, it took me probably a week. And I just love the result, and I'm so excited to give it to the mother-to-be. So let's get cracking. Let's talk about the materials that we're going to use for this blanket, and then let's get stitching up our Bluebells baby blanket. Okay, so let's talk about the yarn we're using for this project. So I'm using the Flex yarn by Loops and Threads, and I've used this type of yarn for a couple of projects. If you've seen the Up and Away baby blanket, where I used it in yellow, and this time I am using this really pretty blue, and it's called Pool Blue. And I'm using this color because I found out that the mother of the baby-to-be, her favorite color is blue. So I thought this will be perfect opportunity to use it here. And this shade is actually really, really nice because you can just see the flecks ever so slightly. And I feel like the color is really allowed to come through. I found with the yellow yarn, the flecks kind of distracted. It had more of an orangey tinge to it. And the orange one was not bad, but I really, really like this blue. So it comes in a skein of 185 grams, which contains 355 yards or 324 meters. And I am going to be using 2 of these skeins for my blanket. Okay. Now, the recommended hook size is a 5mm hook, but I'm actually going to go up and use a 6mm hook, which is also known as a J or a size 10. And you guys know me. You know I don't always adhere perfectly to the recommendation of the hook size. So I'll always go up a couple of sizes if I want my stitches to sit a little bit more loosely for the project. So in case you're wondering, why is she going up instead of using the proper hook? So that's just a personal preference. But if you're super new, I would recommend sticking to the recommended hook size just to make life easier. Okay, and as always, make sure you have a pair of scissors and a yarn needle to sew in your ends at the end of your project. I am also, oops, I almost forgot to show you guys. And that is that I am also using some of this True Boo yarn for the trim around the border. And you guys have seen me use this yarn a lot for other projects. It is Divine. It's 100% rayon from Bamboo, and it is by Lion Brand. And just the softness and the way it glides on the hook is just divine and perfect for things like baby projects. And these come in a 100-gram ball. I'm not going to use it all up, but in case you guys are wondering what I was using for the trim. Now, if I come back here real quick to the yarn, I just want you to notice that it is a medium 4-weight yarn. I really feel this is on the light side, like it's very loosely spun and it sits pretty thin. So that's why I thought I would pair it with this, which actually is a lightweight number 3 yarn, okay? So you can see by the strand, it's pretty light, but when I bring it next to this one, it is lighter, but this is a thinner medium 4. So just for the trim, it's gonna be a-okay. So if you ever decide to mix different colors or different yarns when you're working on projects like this, just make sure that the yarn weight is equivalent to each other, and that way you're gonna have a nice even flow of your fabric. But like I said, I'm just using this for the trim at the end, and I'm going to be stitching very loosely. So you'll see it when we get there. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to begin by placing a slip knot onto our hook. And we are going to work this project, I guess you would call it widthwise. So we're going to start off with the shortest side and going back and forth, and then work our length up, okay? So we're going to begin by chaining 122 chains. Okay, so once you've got your chain complete, just want to make sure that it's nice and even, that you didn't chain too tightly, because we're going to work into these chains. Now, if you are a tight crocheter or if you are using a heavier weight yarn, you may need less chains than I do if you're using heavier weight yarn. If you're a tight crocheter, you may need more chains than I do. So always go by your preferred width in this case, okay? So we're gonna begin right away with the primrose stitch portion of the blanket. So I'm gonna skip 1, 2, and into the third one, I'm gonna place a single crochet. Just like that. Now I'm gonna chain 2, 1 and 2, and back into that same stitch, I'm gonna place a single crochet again. So you may recognize this as the sprig stitch. We've also done a couple of tutorials on this stitch as well. So, but this is actually going to be part of our blanket motif. So now what we're going to do is we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, 1, 2, or these are chains still, I should say. So you're skipping 1, 2, and into the third, we're going to repeat that again. You're going to insert your hook. You're going to place a single crochet, chain 2, and then go back into that same stitch and place a single crochet. And that is what you're going to do all the way down your chain, okay? So again, we skip 1, 2 chains into the third, single crochet, chain 2, and single crochet. And don't worry that these chains are stretching a wee bit. That is normal. It'll all even out as we work along. So there you go. So you're creating these little peaks, okay? So go ahead and do that, and I will meet up with you when you come to the very end. You're going to have 2 chains left over, and I'll meet up with you there to take you through what we're going to do next. Okay, I've come to the end of row 1, and so my work is looking like that. So you can see the little peaks are showing up. And now I have 2 stitches left. So all we're going to do is we're just going to skip a stitch, and into the very last chain there, we're just going to place a half double crochet. Just like that. Okay, so row 1 is complete. We're now going to go on to row number 2. So for row number 2, we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. Whoops, got the tail stuck in there. And then right into that very first stitch, we're going to place a single crochet. Okay, then we're going to chain 1. And into that chain 2 space, we're just going to place a single crochet. Okay, so that's how you're going to start the second row of the repeat every single time. Okay, then we're going to chain 2, 1 and 2, and we're going to go into that space again, and we are going to single crochet. Okay. And then repeat that, 1, 2, and single crochet. So this is the part that deviates a little bit from the typical primrose stitch. 1, 2, it's like an extra row we're adding here just to give the blanket a little bit more defined texture. So you've got something that looks like that, okay? So do that all the way to the end. And I'll meet you at the end of row number 2. And I'm just coming to the very last space where we did that chain 2. So I'm going to single crochet. And now I'm just going to half double crochet into that first turning chain there. So that way we have a nice anchor. And that is the end of row number 2. So it's just creating this cute little kind of lacy effect. And now we're going to go on to row number 3, which is the final row of our repeat. So we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. You're going to turn your work, and you're always going to go right into the next stitch, which is that single crochet you just placed in the previous chain 2 space. And you're just going to place 2 double crochets into that stitch. And this is what helps keep your edges nice and straight. Okay, so you've got your chain 3, which will count as a double crochet. And into that first single crochet, you're going to place 2 double crochets. And that's how you're going to begin row number 3 and every odd numbered row from now on. And now we're going to find the next single crochet stitch, which is right here. And into that stitch, we are going to place a shell stitch. So that means we're going to place 3 double crochets. So I've got 1, I've got 2, and I've got 3. Okay, so it just kind of stretches it out just a little bit. Kind of almost looks like a little bit of a star shape idea. And that is what we're going to do all the way down the row. So we're going to find our next single crochet. So we're skipping these 2 chains. We're going into the single crochet and again placing a shell stitch. So now we've got stitches that just have a little bit more height to them. Just like that, okay? And that is basically the repeat for row number 3. So do that all the way down to the end. You're going to place a shell into every single crochet stitch you come across. So you're going to skip all these chains. You're going to do that all the way until you get to the end of your row. And when you've placed a shell stitch into the second last chain from the row, which is right here. So the last single crochet. This is the last official single crochet. I'm going to meet up with you there and take you through just how to end off row number 3. Okay, so I'm almost at the end of row number 3. I've come to the second last single crochet, and I'm going to proceed to do the same thing I did at the very beginning. Into the last single crochet there, I'm going to place 2 double crochets. So the beginning and the end single crochet will only have 2 double crochets going into it. And then I'm coming to the end where that half double crochet stitch is, and I'm just going to find the top of it, or the top of the chain if it's a chain, and I'm just going to place a double crochet into that. Okay, so you see it's the same as the beginning. So you've got 2 double crochets, 1 double crochet to flank. These are the 3 rows that create that little bell-like shape. So if I turn it upside down, which you guys will remember that I did in the Wedding Bells shawl, did a similar kind of idea. And so there you have it. It's 3 rows. Now that you've completed 3 rows, you're just going to simply continue repeating 3 rows until you get your desired length or width, depending on how you're working your blanket. So I'm just going to start you off on row number 4 now. We're going to go back and repeat row number 1. So we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. And into the very first stitch, you're going to place a single crochet. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to skip the next stitch, and into the following stitch, we're going to place that sprig stitch, which consists of placing a single crochet, chain 2, and then single crochet. Okay, and that's going to give you that little peak again. And then we go on to the next stitch. We're going to skip. So, sorry, let me back up here. When you first start it, you only ever need to skip 1 stitch to create the sprig. From here on out, you will always skip 2 stitches. So we skip 1, 2, and into the 3rd, which coincidentally falls right in the center of that shell. That's where we're going to place our next sprig stitch. So we're going to single crochet, chain 2, and single crochet. So there's a theme here. We're skipping 2 stitches a lot in these rows. So the next 2 stitches we skip, into the 3rd, we place a single crochet, chain 2, and single crochet. Just like that, okay? So normally with this, with the primrose stitch, we would just place a shell into the sprig stitch. We wouldn't do that extra chain stitch row, but because I wanted this to have a specific look, this is how I came up with this design idea. So you're pretty much set now. We're repeating row 1, then you're going to repeat row 2 and row 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, until you get to the end, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and work up my rows, and I'll meet up with you once I've reached my desired width or length, depending on how I end up turning this blanket actually. So we shall see. It will be a surprise for both of us. I will see you back here in a bit. Okay guys, so I have done a total of 67 rows. So my blanket is looking like this. So right now it measures 28 inches in length and of course 24 inches across. Now this is a great measurement because we're going to still add a border, so that's going to give us a couple of extra inches to work with to get at least up to 30 inches. Now this is generally the size that I like to make my baby blankets. Generally baby blankets can go up as large as 42 inches. But it all depends on what you're going to use it for. Like if you're going to use it to actually place in the crib as part of the bedding or the look of the bedding, although nowadays most people are not even putting any blankets in the crib for babies, then you might want it to be larger, or if it's just when you quote unquote make the bed, so to speak. But I know that most of the time people are using these blankets on the go, in the car seat, in the stroller, maybe just to cover on your lap if you're maybe breastfeeding out and about. So So I like the idea of the 30 by 26 inch measurement. So that's what I'm going for here. So we're now going to work on the border. So I am, I don't know, I'm about 2/3 of the way through my second skein. So I still have tons left over. So this is fantastic. Now, I was thinking about going a little further just to get more use out of this, but again, I really like the size that I have. So I'm just going to take you through how we're going to create our little border here. Whoops. And so I repeated my pattern 22 times. So hopefully you can see the beautiful kind of just lovely little subtle texture it creates just with those shells. And I finished on a sprig stitch row. So I did my shells and then I did a sprig stitch row because that is actually the stitch we're going to use for our whole border. So it's just this subtle little kind of scalloping at the end. So I finished this row. So now what we're going to do is we're going to continue on and we're going to continue on creating it along the side. And then we're going to continue creating it along the bottom. So now all edges are going to be quite uniform. So I'm just going to take you through how to come around a corner and how to work into the sides of your stitches, just to kind of give you a little head start, and then you can finish the first round on your own. And then we'll be introducing our trim color. Okay, so we've finished at the very last stitch with one single crochet, right, of that row. So all we're going to do is actually we're going to chain 2 and then go back into that last stitch and single crochet. So we're going to finish the full sprig stitch here. And that creates, look at that, just naturally gives us a little bit of a bend to come around the corner. Now we're working into the sides of stitches, okay? And so this is where you're going to kind of have to eyeball it because we don't really have stitches. Some rows are double crochet stitches on the edges and some are single crochets. So I'm just going to go into the next natural space there because remember, normally we were skipping 2 stitches and into the third. We were placing the sprig stitch. So I'm just going to skip to here. So we can see we had the shells there and then we had the chain row and then the sprig stitch row. So I'm just going to insert right there and single crochet, chain 2, and single crochet. And then you're just going to have to kind of sit back and see if you're happy with how it sits. The main thing is you don't want it to bunch or buckle like that. So see, so far it's looking pretty good. We just came around the corner. So I am now going to go into, so this is where we did our shell stitch row. I want to go in the middle of this double crochet here. And I like going into the stitch as opposed to in the space because see, then it creates an obvious gap like that. So I always like to see if I can go in through a couple of the loops in the middle of the stitch and single crochet, chain 2, and single crochet back into the same spot. And then again, I'll just sit and look. So that's sitting pretty decently. So I'm just going to go over one more here with you guys. So I'm not going to go right here. That's way too close. So there's a nice little spot here. And so every time you put a sprig stitch in there, just make sure you didn't go too far over or too close. Now, because like I said, we have different types of stitches along the side, it's not like I can say, well, every time you see a shell stitch row, place your stitch there because there are varying heights. So there you go. So see how it's not buckling or bunching. That's pretty much it, okay? So you're gonna go all the way along the side. When you come to the corner, just try to make sure that when you come down here, if you can work it so that you work right into the corner, your next sprig stitch, which is your single crochet, chain 2, single crochet, that really helps you to curve around that corner, okay? And what I'm gonna do is I will meet up with you when you get to this corner because we are now working along the bottoms of our foundation chain row, okay? So I'll just go over what I'm going to do to kind of match up nicely that bottom round. So go ahead and go all the way down the side and I'll meet up with you there. So I've come up to the corner and I've just finished doing that edge, and I'm very happy with how it came out. Just sits nice and flush there. And I've done my last sprig stitch in the corner, so it's coming up around the bend. So now we have our foundation chain row, and see how there's those little gaps here? I actually want to slightly close in those gaps. So instead of working into those spaces, we are actually going to work into where we did those single crochets to begin the initial sprig stitch in our first row. So I'm always just going to find that little single crochet bottom there and sprig stitch, chain 2, back into the same space. It's going to stretch it a little bit in the beginning, but it will settle down. And now I just go to the next section. So right here, just insert my hook. And I played around with this, and I found that this spaces out quite nicely. And then it just snuggles in the base of these stitches. So the next one is right here. And as always, you just want to kind of set it down every few stitches and see how you like it. So I'm going to do one more. This is the next little base here. Chain 2. And there we go. Let's have a look. Yeah, so that looks pretty good. So it's stretched out the stitches right now, but once it settles in, just like that. So that's now the bottom of your blanket, and once it's settled out, so you can't even really tell. So this way, you don't really have an up or a down to your blanket, even though technically I would call this kind of the right side up, because you can see the shells facing down, and that's what creates that little bell effect. Okay, so that's it. Just finish now with the sprig stitch along the bottom, along the side, and you'll be back up to the top. We're going to slip stitch to join, and then we're going to bring in our white color. Remember, we had a little bit of that True Boo yarn we were going to use just to add as an accent here. And I will meet you back here when we're ready to introduce our white. Okay, so I finished my first round of the border using that sprig stitch. And just in case you're wondering, my longer side has 41 sprig stitches and my shorter side has 40 sprig stitches. But as always, your count may be slightly different, especially when you're working into the sides of stitches. So don't fret if you've got 42 or 43 sprig stitches on each side, where I have 40, for example. So not to worry. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a little bit of that white accent. And you may notice in this flex yarn, there are little flecks here of white. And I just thought accentuating that in the border would just create a beautiful detail. So I'm going to bring back my True Boo yarn that I've been using for other baby projects. It is lighter. Now this is a lightweight number 3, and it has a little bit of a sheen to it, and I really like it. So I have to be careful here. I would recommend, if you're going to do this white like I am, this is a medium weight 4. I would also use a medium weight 4 yarn. But because I'm just using this for the trim, I didn't have any medium 4 weight white on hand at the moment. And I didn't want to go buy a whole new skein just for this. So I am going to use this lightweight number 3, and I am going to be very relaxed with my stitches, because when you have a lighter weight yarn next to a slightly thicker, you could see some bunching happening. Generally, I would recommend going up a hook size when this is the situation, but because I'm pretty experienced, I'm going to just generally keep my stitches very relaxed here. So in case you tackle this the same way I do, and you notice that it's going to be a little bit more squished in, that's probably why, so just be aware. So what I'm going to do, I've slip stitched to join my last round. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to take out that slip stitch from the previous round here. Okay. Oops, I've got my blanket turned around. Okay, now some of you might just want to snip your yarn at this point and then reintroduce it after, but I'm just going to leave it here, and I'm going to introduce my white because we are going to come back and do another round of the blue. So all I'm going to do is, whoops, when I slip stitch to join, instead of yarning over with the blue, I'm just going to pick up the white, and that is what I'm going to pull through. So it may be a little wonky here. So that's why for those of you a little newer, it may be better for you to just snip your yarn, fasten off, and then slip stitch to join with the new yarn here. So then once I've pulled it through, I'm just going to chain one. That should secure it. And then sometimes what I do is I also just create a little knot here with the old yarn. Very gentle. And that just gives it a little extra, just a little extra security there. And I'm still hanging out with that blue over there. Okay, so now I'm just going to repeat now what I did in round one of our border. So because I am starting in this corner here, okay, I'm going to insert my hook, and actually that should be right in the middle of that little chain here. So remember how we did a sprig stitch going around the corner? So I'm going to insert my hook and single crochet, very relaxed. See how loose I am? Then I'm going to chain two, 1 and 2, and I'm going to go back into that same stitch to single crochet. So you should be really comfortable with the sprig stitch by now, just like that. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to place a sprig stitch into each sprig stitch. So see there, these are the chain 2 spaces. So I will go into this next one here in the chain 2 space. I'm going to single crochet, chain 2, see, really relaxed, and single crochet. Super easy. Go to the next sprig stitch, place a sprig stitch on top. Chain 2 and single crochet. See? Look at how beautiful that's going to look. It's going to really bring out these white flecks. That's what you're going to do all the way around. But what I'm going to do is as always, I like to meet you in that first corner because we're going to do something a little different in that corner sprig stitch going around as we build up our border. So just finish off this first side and I'll meet you back here in just a little bit. Okay, so I've finished my stitches along the first side and I've come up to the corner. So if you're familiar with doing granny squares, you know we've got to create a bend around the corner here. So what we're going to do is we're going to place 2 sprig stitches in this corner stitch separated by a chain 2. Okay, so there's going to be a lot going on here. So we're going to insert our hook, single crochet, chain 2, and single crochet. There's our first sprig stitch. Then we're going to separate it with a chain 2 and now go back in and place a separate sprig stitch. So that means we're going to single crochet, chain 2, and single crochet back into that same stitch. So there's a lot of stitches going on in there. So you basically have single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. That's our first sprig stitch. This this chain 2 here, this is the corner space. That's going to be the separation between this sprig stitch and the second sprig stitch. If you want to, you might want to put a little safety pin or a stitch marker here just to remind you, because it can get a little funny to find where your chain 2 space is, okay? Because we will be working back into this space later on. But see how now it creates a definite corner? That's what we're looking for. So this is what you're going to do in all of your corners. And then you will just continue on placing a sprig stitch into each sprig, okay? And this is going to be row number 2 for your blanket. Or I should say round number 2 for your blanket. Okay, so I'm just finishing my round number 2 of the border, and I just wanted to kind of quickly go over that last corner. So remember we did the 1 sprig stitch in the corner here, so we have to place 1 more, so we're just going to go into that same space. Single crochet, chain 2, and single crochet back into that same space. And then we're going to chain 2 to connect to the other one. And then we're just going to go into that, whoops, we don't want to go into the chain space. You actually want to go into that single crochet here. and slip stitch to join. Okay, and then we're going to snip our yarn. So previously I wasn't snipping the yarn, but because of the way the corner worked, I am going to snip my yarn. So I'm just going to fasten off and we'll weave that in afterwards. Look at how divine that looks. Just a sweet little accent. So now what I'm going to do, isn't that pretty? The white against the blue, I just love it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now reintroduce the blue back in. We're going to add another border. And what I want to do is I'm going to repeat round 1 and round 2. So I'm going to do a round of blue and a round of white one more time. And in fact, you can do it as many times as you like if you want a thicker border. I just love this little final accent with the white contrasting the blue. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go into that chain 2 space between these 2 sprig stitches. See that? So I'm going to go in there, and that is where I'm going to introduce or reintroduce my blue yarn. So sometimes I'll put a slip stitch on a slip knot on the hook. This time I'm just going to bring it through just like that, and I'm going to chain 1. I just like to trap that tail in there, and there we go. Now we're all set. So in the corner you're going to single crochet. So I'm just going to now go back into that same chain space, single crochet, and then I'm going to chain 2, and then I'm going to go back in and place a single crochet in the same stitch, just like that. Okay, so that's the way I started the last round, and then when I come back around, I need to place one more sprig stitch in there with a chain 2 to connect. Okay, and now you just repeat again, finding your very next sprig stitch. So there's one right here, right? Because we just came out of a corner. I'm going to insert my hook, single crochet, chain 2. You know the drill. You're going to be a very proficient expert on the sprig stitch at the end of this project. And then into the very next one. See, now they just show themselves really easily. You don't have to count the stitches. We just continue on. So I'm just going to do one more here so you can see the effect of the blue against the white. Just love it. This is one of my favorite color combinations. It's this pretty blue and white. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? It just creates this kind of little zigzaggy stitch. That's it, guys. So repeat round 1 and round 2 of your border, and your Bluebells baby blanket will be complete. So I'll meet you back here when I have finished my border. Okay guys, so I have finished. I've completed all 4 rounds of my border. Look at how pretty that looks. I am so happy with how that came out. So you've got the little bit of the finer yarn on the edge there, and the blue, it just brings out those white speckles, just divine. Look at that effect. I am so excited to gift this to the mother-to-be. So that is it, guys. So if you have any further questions regarding this project, make sure to leave them for me in the comment box down below. As always, you know that you can reach me directly. As well, if you prefer to email me your questions, you can email them to me at info@crochetcrafty.com. And you know the drill. Come visit me on the website. Sign up for my monthly newsletter because I gift you a free written pattern every month. And don't forget to come and say hi to me on the socials. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at the Stitch Sessions. So, by the way, if you're new here and you really enjoyed hanging out with us for this project, make sure to press that subscribe button. Come hang out with me every Wednesday morning. I upload a brand new tutorial. And if you guys like this type of project, make sure to also give me a thumbs up. That lets me know that you want to see more projects like these. So I had a blast working on this one. I just love the texture that it creates. And you can see that little bell shape right there. So there is your Bluebells baby blanket. I am curious to see what colors you guys are going to be using. Are you going to use the blue like me, or are you going to change it up a little bit? Make sure to tag me on your pictures. So post your pictures and tag me at the stitch sessions. I always love to see the colors you guys choose. So that's all for this week. Stay tuned next week. We've always got more fun crochet crafting projects for you up ahead. So as always, guys, have an amazing day today. Happy crocheting as always. Take good care of yourselves. And I look forward to seeing you guys in next week's session. Bye-bye.